You watched it so many times before, and now you're gonna watch it again. But it's been so many years since you last saw it, and now you show it to your friends, and they're like, "What?
What am I watching?
Why this?
What is
What?
this?
Why?
Why
this film?" And today I'm joined by Nadja. Hello.
Hi there.
And your chosen movie, am I saying this right? Is it Ronja The Robbers Daughter?
Yes, I think in English that's the correct title.
And what's the Swedish title?
Well, I don't even know how to pronounce it, so I'm not going to attempt it because I'm German, not Swedish. And in German, I mean, when I first saw it, to me it was called Ronja The Robbers Daughter, which is the German title.
Oh, okay, that's cool. But it's a Swedish film, isn't it?
Yes.
And did you see it with German dub? Or in Swedish with
yes
sub?
It was actually quite interesting rewatching it because I do love the Swedish language, but when I watched it as a child it was dubbed, as most films were in my childhood, so it was kind of fun to actually get the original sound rewatching it.
That's really cool. So the IMDb breakdown, one of many that I've picked, is that Ronja is born on a stormy night, the daughter of the chief of a band of robbers, Mattis, and his woman, Lovis. Her life revolves around learning to cope in the beautiful but dangerous wilderness surrounding their home. One day, a rival band of robbers run by Borka move in a bit too close for comfort, and Ronja befriends Borka's son, Burke, as the conflict between the two chiefs escalate. Why this film?
Well, there's so many reasons why this is one of my absolute favorites. I'm actually, first thing I'm going to tell you is not like all the rational reasons, but simply when I rewatched it last week in preparation for this, and I hadn't watched it in about 10 years, and I just switched it on. I just heard the starting music, and I already my heart was filled with joy, and it was just like this a place of kind of safety and freedom. And I guess to me the movie completely symbolizes everything that was good about my childhood, like all the fun memories I have, and my family has a strong kind of emotional connection to Sweden, not in any terms of relation, but we used to spend all the family summer holidays in Sweden, actually.
Oh, nice.
We would be in that nature and at a lake and spend basically 4 weeks every summer just being outside and being in Swedish nature. So I guess I really relate to that as well.
That's so awesome, because most of this is just outside in Sweden and it's gorgeous. Did you find that it was a complete nostalgic pool that you could just dive into? There wasn't anything as an adult that you were like, oh, that's interesting, or that you saw in a different light at all?
There were a few things, because I guess what actually really struck me is how much I kind of grabbed my value system from stories like that. I mean, it was something my mother really believed in as well. And now, of course, I have a bit more of a conscious, aware view on kind of all the wisdom that is in those stories and all the different themes that are touched upon. And of course, as a child, for example, I didn't think about feminism or anything like that, or about, is a man allowed to cry, or these sort of topics. And I think it's just written into those stories so seamlessly and so with so much heart and love. I'd actually be quite interested, I don't know if I'm allowed to ask you a question, but to hear how it was for you, because obviously this is not a film that English kids would have seen when they were small.
Not at all.
So how did you feel about it, of watching it first time as an adult?
I absolutely adored it, because it's weirdly it has elements that are very similar to a lot of sort of British tales, that sort of running off into the forest and all of these sort of mythological creatures, and that's the sort of Britain that I love. I grew up on the countryside. I ran around in the forests a lot. That was really lovely. it's filmed because it's 80s, it feels so 80s as well, and I love that. Like lots of sort of animatronic puppety sort of creatures. It's very fantastical as well as being this really sweet story of like acceptance and understanding. It was a lot longer than I thought it was going to be. It was 2 hours, but no, I thought it was like I want more of it. I was like, how has this not been remade? Why was it not dubbed and shown in England? And like maybe it was dubbed and shown in America, because it seems to be quite a big, well-known story, and it's been adapted quite a lot, just not in English.
Yeah, it's actually really interesting because when I moved to England, I kind of like, you start noticing that you have different childhood references when you talk to friends, or when English friends talks amongst each other, and they're like have this inside joke about some series everyone knew, and I'm like, I don't know. And in Germany, those stories are actually really, really big. Like Astrid Lindgren, the author who also wrote the screenplay adaptation, she is basically a kind of like a hero of mums in Germany, and she won lots of kind of literature prizes in Germany, interestingly.
Yeah.
And I mean, her works have been translated, what did I read, into 95 languages and language varieties. So there's so much there. But something even more interesting, like for us as actors, that I read up on, and I was like, wow, I have to research into that. Apparently, she also wrote quite a few of like children's theatre plays, and they've never been translated.
Really?
So, at least not into English. So I was like, wow, someone should translate them. They'd be amazing. So
Literally,
yeah.
I would be so up for that. Do that. Do that.
Well, I need to find someone who speaks Swedish or learn Swedish then.
I trust you'll pick languages up quicker than I could. So.
Yeah, it's like, and I grew up kind of with all of her stories. I mean, I guess a lot of people did, but maybe it was more special for me as well, because my mum was actually really strict on us not watching a lot of TV.
Mm-hmm.
And there were only really specific things we were allowed to watch. Like I wasn't allowed to watch any cartoons or any of that. So the only thing was like Astrid Lindgren stories, and that was like the highlight that we could watch, like a 2-hour film together. And my mum would read the books to us as well. So it's got a lot to do with like kind of like the motherly love, I guess, for me as well.
Definitely. So was Ronja just one book, or was it a series of books?
That was one of the books that was just one story, one novel. She's also written a different series, children's book series, like Pippi Longstockings, which is also quite famous.
Pippi Longstockings.
Yeah.
Oh God, I know
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. And also in Swedish it's called Emil I Lönneberga, which in German weirdly was translated, the name was changed from Emil into Michael, so it was called Michael from Lönneberga, which is all these like stories and adventures this little boy goes on, and he's basically really mischievous, a bit like Ronja as well. So it's basically kind of like these loving stories about misbehaving children and how they're kind of growing as people from not always doing what the adults say.
Yeah.
Which is so nice. And those stories usually were divided up quite nicely into chapters, so my mum would read a chapter every night. Which was quite nice.
Yeah. It's so beautiful, this movie, and it's got a really magical quality. Like similar things we would have had in Britain would have been like The Children of Green Know or The Sorcerer's Apprentice. That sort of like British TV show that was always like practical effects, like set in a forest. It just felt, you're absolutely right, like I'd never watched it before, and I felt like I was coming home because it was so familiar in terms of its aesthetic and its story, but there were some stark differences that you would not see in British media, and It's so funny. The children swear. Like, I don't know if it was the same in the German or Swedish translation, but in the English translation, it was coming up as like shit and bastard, and like she
Yeah.
says "damn you" a lot. And I was like, "Whoo!" That was common in England.
Yeah, and interestingly, I think because I used to have it on DVD, but that DVD is somewhere in Germany, so I couldn't access it. So we watched the same version that's online, and I think that that might even be the cut version because
Ah,
they did a cinema release that was kind of more tame. And then they released a TV version where there's a bit more violence as well,
yeah.
and it's a bit more brutal in terms of like when the harpies attack. I think language-wise, like Sweden and Germany have never been too bothered about
Yeah,
that.
that's what I felt. You could see the sort of censorship rules and how they differ in each country because it made complete sense that this girl would use this language, but I was watching it as like this is a children's movie, and I was like, bloody hell! Like you don't get like the worst we got was bloody hell in like the Philosopher's Stone. When Ron Weasley told Harry Potter to piss off, that was the first children's movie I think that we were all like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
also, there's a bit where they all run out into the snow,
The nakedness.
completely naked, just a bunch
Yeah.
of grown adult men, completely naked. And I was like, this completely makes sense. I'm cool with it. But you would not see that in a normal movie, let alone like a kids' movie. I was like, this is so good. It just really shows you how much more relaxed and understanding and mature like Europeans are to the British. Like, I was like,
Yeah.
this is what's good.
I think there's kind of like a grounding and relaxedness to it that is also something that I kind of miss living here.
Mhm.
Um, uh, but at the same time, I guess it's always also kind of you feel nostalgic about what you know, I guess.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Even though I'm not saying my parents used to run around naked in the snow. They are German, and lots of people think Germans do that, but my parents didn't.
But it's like just a much more adult approach to life, like what's important. Like nudity in humans is not a thing we need to worry about because it's a completely ordinary thing. It's normalizing things that are ordinary, but for some reason the British were like, we've decided that this is wrong and
Mm.
sinful, and therefore we're not going to put it in our movies and we're going to punish anyone that does do it in our movies or whatever. There's a lot of singing in this movie, and I think I read that all the actors that they employed had
Yes.
to be able to like sing professionally because it's lovely. It's just this. You really get the vibe of this like tribe of people
Yeah.
who just. It was very sort of Beowulfy. They all live
Yeah.
in this sort of castle, and they all like have feasts every night, and have a sing song, and it's just really, really lovely with like a roaring fire.
Yeah, I find that aspect of it so wholesome as well, that kind of like community thing and just kind of like the joy of it. And also one of the songs where the other robbers kind of sing about the chief, and then he starts getting upset until he realizes they are actually singing about the enemy, and it's just that kind of fun thing. And also after they run back in from the snow, they say, oh well, because their clothes are being washed, they have to actually wear what they've stolen from all these like noble ladies, so
Mhm.
they're actually in drag, so they're all putting on the women's clothes. And
Yeah.
it's kind of like it's very progressive, like for an 80s children's
Oh,
story.
it is. And I put it down to it being not British or American because I was like, we have men crying, we have strong family bonds, and like male daughter relationships that aren't twisted or broken in any way. We have the men in drag and like enjoying it and like singing it and like people cheering them on, and no one says, they're just like, what clothes are left? Oh, these women's clothes. Cool.
Yeah.
They all rush out into the snow nude. They all like, because because you're like the woman, like it would have been nice to have seen more women in it, but then it would
Yeah.
have taken away from the character of Lovis, who is this like, I mean, the first way she's described is like, stay here and look after Lovis, and he's like, do you mean if anyone attacks Lovis, I should look after the criminal who's attacking her because like he's
Yeah.
smarter than all of you. Um, so I guess if you had other women, it would take away her sort of character, but still, but like you really got the sense that it was a like shared ruling of the robbers. Like it wasn't the robber chief and his woman as it's so often referred to. You could
Mm.
see that very much so. Like that was an equal footing from both tribes as well, which was lovely. Um, and
Yeah, and she also kind of like she was kind of telling him what's happening quite a few times as well. Even the night in the beginning of the movie, the night where Ronja is born, so she's in labor and she's kind of singing to calm herself down, and it's this like you get the whole spirit of this man, like he's this strong man, but he's quite helpless in the situation.
yeah,
There's a storm and his child is being born and he's quite overwhelmed, and like from the start they show him at the same time as vulnerable as well as strong,
yeah.
which I really love.
Definitely. And like he unashamedly cries. He like and it makes you, as he's like a fully rounded human being, it makes you care. I'm not even gonna lie. Like there's a bit in the film where they've managed to kidnap the boy Burke of the opposing robber tribe, and they're basically using him as ransom, where they're like, you get out of our castle or we'll like kill and keep your son forever. So Ronja is an absolute badass and leaps over the turrets to the other side of the castle to be held as hostage on their side. I literally wrote, yes, Ronja. And then he turns around and they're like, cool, so we've got your child, you've got our child, let's just switch now.
Mm.
And he's like, you can have your child back, but you can keep that one because I don't have a child. And I
Yeah,
gasped out loud. I was like,
yeah,
how could
yeah,
you? Oh my God. And like, it was really sad. And then the mother,
yeah.
of course, was like, this moron may not have a child, but I do, and you will be returning her right now. And I liked it because it didn't drag or dwell on anything. It was paced so well. Like they could have, if it was made today and it was made in America, that scene would have lasted about 20 fucking minutes, and they would have like threatened each other's
Yeah.
children and like blah 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 blah. But they just held the hostages. They did the thing. They switched them back. Boom, done. Let's move on because there's more important things.
Yeah, and actually, in terms of kind of themes, what really struck me rewatching it with the thing with the father as well, but also actually in the children when they're first meeting and fighting, it's that whole pride and competition against kind of love and collaboration
Hmm.
topic going on throughout the entire story arc, and a lot they're all quite stubborn characters, which I also like.
Yeah.
So they're kind of virtuous in some ways, but they're all really flawed as well. And it's not like, oh, there's this one hero and oh, ooh, or they defeat the evil other robbers. No, in the end the two robber bands, they actually collaborate.
Hmm.
No, because they've realized actually we've got more in common um, than the reasons we should fight each other, and
Literally.
that's just kind of so nice and yeah, wholesome again.
And so lovely that, like, on the surface, you think this is going to be sort of Romeo and Juliet because it's
Yeah.
two children of opposing tribes coming together, but no one that's not already old and sick has to die. Um, there's no sort of huge bloodshed. It's just very much like they have like one small fight, but really it's like it's more for appearance's sake than anything else. Because by that point, they've already pretty much decided like this is just what's going to happen, which is really lovely. I love all of the different creatures that like
Yeah.
dwell in the forest. There's
Yeah.
like those weird little Muppet things that are just
Oh,
constantly like,
yes.
why?
And they, yeah,
Why?
and we used to like imitate them as children, like all the time. We go like, of course, we'd go in German, go, wieso denn bloß, wieso denn bloß? And we'd like walk around the house and drive our parents crazy because it was like the most fun thing to do.
Literally,
And
I was watching it and I was like, this is so playable to have these little creatures that live underground. They're not threatening, they're just a bit dozy. And all they say about everything is like, why? Why is the girl in the ceiling? Why is she screaming? Why is there another person screaming? Why? And I was like, this is brilliant.
yeah.
It's really
And
lovely to have creatures that are non-threatening because then you sort of go up the scale of like how threatening the creatures are.
yeah, and the kind of like the grey trolls as well. It's kind of, I mean, it's not quite the same, but it kind of made me realize, oh, that's why, like in Harry Potter, when I started reading that, the Dementors felt kind of familiar because when her father tells her how to protect herself from the kind of grey trolls, gnomes, he says, oh, they're not dangerous if you're not afraid of them. Just kind of like the idea of the fear always feeding the danger, which I think is very topical anyways, always. But it's just kind of like, if you don't feed the fear, you can't be defeated by them.
Which is so lovely, and it's such a good lesson in like adulthood and like bravery, and it also means that there is a way to overcome them. So they're the sort of next ones up. They're these sort of like bustling, almost small bear-like creatures that are grey, and they're always surrounded by like mist and stuff. There's one bit
Yeah.
where she like gets almost dragged into the underworld.
Oh, yeah, that's really dark, actually.
Yeah.
I remember that bit was always very scary to me because it's like she loses consciousness and it's almost like a siren song or something like that.
Yeah.
So the fog comes and she hears these voices and she doesn't seem to quite remember what happened afterwards because obviously the boy, Birk, he saves her because he doesn't seem to be kind of drawn in by the voices. So he kind of gets her on the rope and just kind of pulls her out. And then afterwards she's a bit like, oh, you know, why are you so close to me?
Yeah.
Or something like that. And he just basically saved her life. But I do think I thought about that moment. I was like, I think she knows he just saved her life, but she's like kind of embarrassed about it. So she's like, why are you so what are you doing?
It's the sort of, there's no visible monster. It's just a sort of marshland with lots of fog seeping out of the floor, and the fog starts getting thicker and thicker, and there's this sort of eerie female music, as you said. And she's not, there's no pit, there's no sort of hole that we're watching her walk into. It's just, don't follow the voices, you'll be sucked into the underworld and you won't come back. And we've been warned that if you fall into the hellmouth, that's it, there's no coming back. I can imagine I would have been utterly terrified as a child because there's no visual threat. There's just this idea that she's getting closer and closer to, and that's really scary. The harpies are really scary. They're almost, are they actresses who have had like, because the mouths when they move look human and painted, but then they've got almost like a bird cap over the top half of their face?
Yeah. I mean, I actually didn't look up if they used actresses for all of those. I know I think they used some for some of them because that's one of the things why I thought, oh, I think this is the cut version, because actually when they kind of once come down and grab at her, I remember that I saw a version where it was kind of much more brutal and you could actually kind of fully see the female breasts and nipples and that kind of thing. And that seems to have been kind of cut out. You have like small moments of that in the version we saw. But I think in the like extended version, it's much more this kind of visceral female clawing power and much more that you can actually see. It's quite human, which is probably what makes them scary in a way as well.
This is the thing. I think I wanted more of that because they're there at the very opening. It's a great opening. It's like this massive thunderstorm, and all of these what look like sort of peregrines and falcons are like circling around this castle during the storm. But they're shrieking and they're being like, "She will be born! She's gonna be born! Oh, the storm is so bad!" But they just look like birds. So I was like, oh, they're like, maybe they're witches in disguise as birds, or maybe just the birds talk in this world. I don't know. And then he's like, go away, harpies. And I was like, harpies? Maybe harpies are different in Sweden to how they are here. But then what you've just described is what a harpy looks like. So they clearly had made them look like harpies. They just, yeah, cut it because it's like naked woman. Can't have that.
Yeah, so I looked up kind of the meaning of harpies, and I mean there's this whole like Greek mythology thing about them, and apparently what I thought was quite interesting that depending on some cultures, pictures and writings, some people kind of thought that they were very beautiful, dangerous women, whereas some stressed the ugliness of them.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of interesting how that divides apparently. And also apparently their meaning, which goes with the storm, is a half human half bird personification of storm winds.
Oh,
So
cool.
and storm winds, of course, I think is like nature's metaphor for change as well. And it's like her birth, and then they come back when it's autumn, and they know kind of like, ooh, we're going to have to decide what happens in winter. Are we going to stay in the cave and risk freezing to death, or are we going to go back to our parents who we don't agree with, basically?
Yeah. It's so interesting. I have to say I was waiting for more of a showdown between the Harpies and Ronja because they seemed like they were out to get her. They seemed like they prophesized that she would bring about change. I didn't really know how they felt about it, but they kept coming back in an attempt to kill her every now and then, but only very briefly, and then they'd sort of run off again. So I was waiting for her to be confronted by like the Queen of the Harpies and have to like solve a riddle, or they would like kidnap someone or something like that. But it never really happened. They were just sort of there within the story, which was nice. I think I just wanted more because I was like, they're cool and scary.
Yeah, and I think there's a bit more to that in the book, but I have to admit, like, I don't have the book here, so I couldn't like read it, and I did watch the movie more often than I read the book, so it's very kind of, that version is very present with me. But yeah, I still think for like such a reasonably kind of long children's story, it struck me as I watched it again, because I was like, oh, this is quite long. I don't remember it being that long. But then I started watching it, and it was like, I wasn't bored for a second. It was over so quickly, just because I always get so engaged with the story, even now. I'm just like, whoa, because also the cinematography is just beautiful. It's just the landscapes, the editing is actually really well done as well, with how the nature and the people, the balance of it, and the kind of respect and love for both the people, the animals, the plants, and all of that. And I think they really created something back then that really was something that Astrid Lindgren wrote, and it was not one of those where it's like, yeah, we'll kind of make the story our own. And when I researched kind of a bit more into the actors and all of that, because of course I didn't do that when I watched it as a child, I just enjoyed it. I actually was quite struck by how famous all of these actors were in Sweden at the time. So they actually had a really high class cast. They were partly part of the like Royal National Theatre's rep company and stuff like that. And were like working with Ingmar Bergman and like all of these kind of big names, and yes, a lot of them, every actor I looked up, like some of them I couldn't find any info on, because probably they're either not actors anymore, or just, you know, it was the time before the internet when they were having their career, partly. But then the ones I found, I got one piece of surprising kind of information about everyone. I was like, oh, these people all have such interesting lives. Like the girl who played Ronja, she ended up being a member of parliament in Sweden later on.
No way.
And and Berg, the boy, he's a journalist now, and you know, the father Mathers, he was a famous actor, and some of the other ones, I don't want to say anything wrong, but like some of them were like heads of theater companies, and one of the robbers was like, when I looked him up, apparently he was a massive like musical star, and all these sorts of things. And I was like, wow, that is quite cool. And they all got together for this project, and just really kind of, you can feel they all really believed in it as well. There's not even a hint of like patronizing. And that's what I've really loved about her writing as well. All of her stories are, I feel, fit for children, but they also actually expose children to things they need to be exposed to. So they don't overprotect the children. There is scary stuff in there, and it deals with difficult topics like grief and mourning and stuff like that. But it is done in such a caring way that it just feels healing more than threatening.
Definitely. I really felt that. I felt that it was a passion project from people that cared about the source material. It did feel like they'd made an effort. It felt like it was a big, I guess, like blockbuster. It felt like it was the summer movie almost, even if they sort of didn't have them back then. It felt like the summer movie. Like, oh, they've adapted the beloved children's classic with some of the top class actors. Like, I really did feel that. And I think that's another reason why I loved it so much, because as she's leaving the house for the first time, he's like, don't fall in the river. And she's like, well, what do I do if I do? And he's like, swim. And then he's like, don't do this. And she's like, well, what happens if I do that? And he's like, well, you're going to have to learn not to. Don't fall in the hellmouth. Well, what do I do if I do that? Oh, you'll die. So don't do that. And she's like, okay, I won't do that. And it's like...
Yeah, actually with that, I like wrote out some little quotes that I really love, and you just mentioned the part where the father says, take care you don't fall into the river, and then you see her later actually going out, and then the old man says to her, my heart and pride and joy, where are you going? And she says, I'm going to watch out to not fall into the river. And he says, where are you doing that? And she says, well, by the river, otherwise there'd be no point. And it's just this whole kind of like, yes, know what's dangerous, but also you're going to have to take risks to be alive and to just do things. I was also, when the two children lived together in the cave, I kind of laughed out loud when the boy says, I was thinking of getting some fresh water. And she says, well, thinking doesn't get us anywhere. You either get it or you don't, basically. And it's just these kind of little sharp wisdoms that are like, yeah, actually good point. And they're kind of good motivators and actually reminders that I still find very useful to my own life now, where I feel like, yeah, actually, she's so right. And it's just I did watch this when I rewatched it last week with my partner, and he saw it as well as a child, but he didn't have it like as much as me, and he just started laughing when we were watching it, and I was like, why are you laughing? And he just looked at me and was like, I can see why you like this movie and why you identified with her so much, like, because obviously she's this like dark-haired, dark-eyed, like a child, really big hair, which I had as well as a child, and just kind of like, I think she is who I wanted to be as a child, because I was much more shy and I was a bit more obedient, but she was kind of like, she gave me the inner feeling of, yes, I want to be like her. And when we got a cat, we actually named the cat Ronja. So it definitely, like, she left an impression, and we felt a cat that has her own mind. It's a fitting name, kind of
Perfect
thing.
name for a cat. It's so good. I really want to read the book now. And yeah, she's like the perfect role model for children. Not like anything I think I've ever come across, especially as a girl. Like you'd get that sort of character male a lot in British literature, but you'd never get it. The closest you get is probably George from the Famous Five, and even then it's like nowhere near as interesting because they never fought actual monsters. They just fought like criminals or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, in terms of like strong girls and women, which are always there in her story, but never like on the nose. It's just there. It's just the reality. Like in Pippi Longstockings, I think someone warns her about and says he's the strongest man in the world, and she says, "Man, yes, but I'm the strongest girl in the world." Uh, which is just to be doing that at the time she did it. And yeah, what I find quite amazing as well is that she started writing quite late in her life. I think she was like in her late 30s when she was writing kind of like to entertain her own children. It started, and then she became the most popular children's book writer, and I mean she was like really famous in her lifetime. She was in her mid-90s when she died, and the Swedish royal family was at her funeral. It was like a state funeral. It was like she was so massive, and I think she just represents the soul of everything that's kind of good about Sweden. One of the kind of best quotes that I think she said this in a speech, is where she said, "Give the children love, and still more love, and the common sense will come by itself."
Oh,
and
so
I think
true.
that's, just perfect. So it's just something that really I can always go back to and still enjoy. And I know I'm not only enjoying it for nostalgic reasons. Of course, that's a big part of it. But at the same time, I also still find the stories quite valuable and nice. And now I get some of the jokes that are actually kind of more adult jokes that are kind of woven in there a little bit. So it's just fun.
No, I really loved it. I love fantasy, and I don't get put off by like practical effects. And I worry that if you're not necessarily, but it's not just it's set in this sort of vague fantasy realm, but not really, not ridiculously so. Not like it's just sort of like the countryside that has foxes, badgers, and pixies, as opposed to like a full-blown fantasy realm. But definitely check it out if you haven't, because it's on YouTube. You can watch it with English subtitles, and it's so charming. Doesn't even do it justice. Like, it is charming, but it's also clever and mature and heartwarming and responsible, and it's really thoughtful and just really, really fun, just really lovely. Just stick it on in the background. Like, it really is just lovely. I really, really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for suggesting it. It was
Thank you. It's very good to go back to these things, and especially the times we're currently having in the world. It's just like nice and wholesome, and like actually there's so many great things, and like going back to nature, and it's just fun.
Yeah, and it must be fun as someone that didn't get to watch much sort of visual media in that sense. You must have watched this till the like VHS broke, I imagine, like over and over and over, because I certainly would have done.
Yeah, definitely, as often as we were allowed to, we would watch those stories, because it really made me think, actually, have I turned into someone with that value system because I was fed that so much? Because a lot of the values in there are really what I live by to this day. And the kind of like freedom I seek, and the kind of like enjoyment of like jumping naked into a river or something like that. I mean, loads of people enjoyed that, but it's just I was like, oh, actually, yeah, that really was fed to me from an early age, and it was wholesome and nice. I keep repeating myself, but it is.
But it is though. It is. It's so wholesome. Like it really is. Like, and this is the thing. Whilst being from a different culture, quite clearly in certain aspects, like I said, it does also feel so familiar. I don't know if it would be the same if you grew up in the heart of a city. Maybe it's because I grew up in the countryside that it felt like that. But it felt like it could have been British at a time, but I liked that it wasn't. I really did like that it wasn't. So yeah, thank you so much. Is there anything you want to plug? I know, obviously, we're quarantined, so you might not be in any live plays, but...
No. Well, I'm doing like online workshops and things. So far, no online performances, but if you want to follow me on Instagram or Twitter, you can do Nadja Mathern. Luckily for an actor, I'm the only person in the world with my name apparently, so you will find me if you Google. And otherwise, let me know on social media what you think of the episode. Otherwise, have a lovely time watching or reading Ronja and all the other Astrid Lindgren stories.
Literally, I'm going to order it on Amazon and read it because there's A, nothing else to do, and B, I just really, really, like, I know I'm going to love it. Do you know what I mean?
Yay!
You know, when you're just like, yes, that's a tick from me. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on the episode. I hope you had a good time. And we'll see you next time on Why This Film. Bye!
Bye!